It's our honor to have with us this evening Jill Shames. Jill Shames is a Ola from the United States. The United States, has lived in Rehovot for quite a long time, I believe. She's a social worker, and she also is very mumchit, expert self-defense for women, highly recommended, so they tell me. And the reason that we have invited her here this evening is because, reading from the flyer, for 6 days in early March, Jill Shames put her training as a social worker and trauma counsellor to use, helping children and women in Moldova and across the border in Ukraine. This evening, Jill is going to share with us her experiences as a volunteer with the United Hatzalah. She was helping these refugees. She met them. She helped them with meeting their immediate needs after their harrowing flight from the war in Ukraine. So I'll now hand you over to Stephen, who is going to interview Jill. And that's going to be the format of the evening. I understand that there will be plenty of opportunity for questions, right? And there is also it's also accompanied by a presentation photographs. So I'm now going to hand you over to Stephen and to Steve, who is working the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Jelly. And thanks, Jill, for spending the time with me earlier this week to go through the basically off and on what we're going to be talking about. Eddie said there'll be time for questions at the end. I hope there'll be time for answers as well. Please make notes. I really do advise you to take a pen and paper, make a pen and paper handy, because there'll be something that she'll say that you'd like a little bit of more information on, and then we can go back to it at the end. Okay, so Jill, you spent 6 days in Moldova helping. How did this all begin? How did it start?
Hang on a second, should I turn off the presentation at the moment, Jill? Or?
Well, you can actually you can leave that on for right now, because I would like you to see those two people look related. Yeah, don't we? Because I want to dedicate my presentation to you tonight to this woman who is on my left, but I don't know where she is on your screens. That's my great-grandmother, Leah Gittel, Lena, who fled from the Ukraine in the late 1800s, fleeing from the Russian army. Does this sound familiar? Oh, yeah, it does sound a little familiar. In this case, the Russian army wasn't coming in and destroying cities. They were coming in and recruiting Jews. And as you know from Jewish history in that part of the world, if my great-grandfather had been conscripted by the Russian military, since they served about 25 years, usually in the front lines, I probably would never have been born. So I want to express my appreciation for this particular refugee. She fled she got the jailers drunk, grabbed my great-grandfather out of prison, and fled with young children to the United States. And that's the reason that I'm alive to tell you this story today. And I'm really hopeful that many of the people that I met along the way working on the border of Ukraine may have similar stories to tell once they've been able to get their lives together. So that's
so Jill, basically that really is how it all began.
Well, you know what, it's things don't have a beginning. They just keep circling around and around and around. I'm right now wearing my usual, this is what I wear all the time when I go out on call. I became a member of the psychotrauma unit of HOB Hatzalah about 4 years ago, I guess. I was really intrigued by the idea. What we do is, you know what happens when they call an ambulance, right? Medics come running out, maybe a paramedic, and okay, so there are circumstances, many circumstances, where treating the person is one thing, but there are people who are standing around, the family, going, what the hell is happening, and what's happening? Is my family member going to survive? If it's a cardiac arrest, we get called in on calls like that where there are family members, where there's an accident and there are witnesses, where there is suicide, all kinds of situations where the focus, there may be a focus on the medical needs of someone, but there's also a high probability that someone may develop PTSD as a result of the experience they're having right at this minute. And it's known from research that if you are able to intervene with those people when they first show signs of what we call an acute stress response, if you're able to intervene early, you can prevent that, you can short circuit that process and prevent that whatever 20% of people who develop acute stress responses will go on to develop PTSD, which can last for months, years, or a lifetime. So that's our job. We come into households when people are in really serious, under stress, under grieving, whatever, and the vast majority of what we see are normal responses to what's happening, and we do what we can to help people move forward. But our training is to spot those people who are going into an acute stress response. So when we were sent on this mission, what happened was,
how did it begin for you?
so there was a message sent out to all the medics, paramedics, and psychotrauma unit members, saying that after the war began, the Russians invaded, fairly quickly, they organized a pilot team that ran over there. So they were there within 48 hours of the whole thing beginning, starting to figure out what needed to be done. And then a message was sent out saying, we're sending another delegation. Who would like to go? And they figured out that they would get a few people, where hundreds of Israelis who are members of Ehud Hatzalah, the rescue units, volunteered to go. I was fortunate enough, because I'm it's so funny, I'm translating the Bechir, I'm on the senior, I'm like a big shot, because I actually have an MSW on the psychotrauma team. I was sent with a group of people from that particular team. And our main purpose was to work with people, but also to start working with the medics and the paramedics on site to help them figure out the most trauma-informed way to work with these refugees, and also to be there for them themselves. That's another big part of our job. It's called, we call it Hosen. The word Hosen means resilience, but the letters also stand for the name of our unit. Hosen Pnimi, inner resilience, is the name of the function we have, where we actually work with our own medics and our own paramedics to help prevent them from developing secondary trauma. We don't want them going home with all those nightmares.
So you got the message and you responded to it, presumably?
Immediately. Oh man, I couldn't have responded any faster. I was so thrilled to be able to be involved in something like this. It's like, I've always wanted to be able to do this kind of humanitarian work. And I'm generally kind of, I mean, my biggest concern is so funny. My husband worries that I'm going to get killed somewhere. But my big concern is, what am I going to do about Shabbat, and what am I going to do about Kashrut? Because I don't, that part of my brain that worries about getting killed doesn't work so well. So, and with Ehud Hatzalah, I knew that I wasn't the only one who was going to have the issue, and somebody would be worrying about it. So I didn't have any worries. So I volunteered.
How much notice did you get when you said you're going to go, but before you actually went?
Well, when our first team went out, I think they thought it was going to take them, a week to kind of get themselves together. I figured I'd have a couple of weeks. I had 48 hours notice. Yes, which infuriated certain members of my family. But
what did you pack? What did you do?
Well, actually, I have to say that I packed using the advice that people who were there on the ground gave me, and I would not, if I was able to go back again, I would pack completely differently. because you see that orange jacket that they gave us that in Israel. Can you see that that's at the airport in Israel? And I was dying. I mean, we were all dying, but we were told you have to wear it now because we have to take pictures. I'm sure there's a donor who deserved to appreciate these incredible jackets. Well, I have to tell you, whoever that donor was, I said many blessings to them because I packed a coat, but there was nothing that worked better than this jacket that I was wearing. And I wore it, the only time I didn't wear it was when I was sleeping. I had it on all the time and it worked really well.
Oh, 'cause it was so warm.
Columbia made it, and it's reversible, so you don't have to walk around looking like a emergency signal at all times.
Did you actually forget anything?
Let me think a minute. Well, you know, my problem wasn't that I forgot things. My problem was that when we arrived in Moldova, we arrived with about, I don't know, 3-4 tons of humanitarian aid. And even though they had done all the paperwork, this is going to sound familiar to any Ole, even though we had done all the paperwork and whatever it is you have to do, all that, those tons of equipment got held up somewhere, security or meches or who knows, and so did our suitcases. So all of my warmest clothing, my boots and the extra gloves and everything were in my suitcase. And I was in Moldova and it was really cold.
You didn't fly to Moldova, did you?
No, I didn't, as a matter of fact. Oh yeah, we were going to show those maps.
What about maps? Yes, we have some
Steve
maps.
Morris, I didn't put those in here. Do you have those maps that I sent? I know he's really good at
I
this.
can't remember where they were.
Okay.
In
I'll-
WhatsApp,
Yes.
let me see.
Send them by email, Jill, didn't you?
I think I sent them both ways.
I got it in WhatsApp.
Yeah, you sent it by WhatsApp, then you said send it by email because it would be better.
Okay,
I
we've
don't
got
know. Are
them.
we share? Can you see them? Is it sharing them?
I
No,
don't.
we've still got the grandmother.
Okay. Hang on a second.
You can take her off. I never got to meet her, but I heard so many stories about her. I feel like I thought about her all the time.
Brilliant.
Hey! All right, I think that this could be really helpful.
Yes,
for
I think so.
people to get a sense.
So where did you
Again,
fly to? What are we looking at here? Okay, we've seen the border with Ukraine.
okay, you can see Ukraine, and you can see, whose little arrow is that? That's not mine. You can see Ukraine, and you can see Romania on the opposite side, okay? So that's Moldova in the middle. Moldova, I'm told, is the poorest of the European countries, which is a great distinction, I guess. We flew into Iasi, in Romania. So you can
Where
see
is
the
that?
red circle
that's
in
it.
Romania. There you go.
Mhm.
That's Iasi. And
Right.
when our missions to these missions were the first time that any El Al flight has flown into Iasi. I mean, they actually had to arrange it for them to go into this airport. And then when we arrived there, we sort of like, first of all, we arrived at the airport at something like, I don't know. It was something like 2 o'clock in the morning and we didn't leave till 6. So when you see pictures of us smiling, we're actually smiling in our sleep while we're standing there. But we arrived in Iasi and then they put us on buses. All of the people who were in the psychotrauma unit were on the same little bus and they drove us to, it looks like Chisinau, but that's Kishinev.
But before you go on, you mentioned when we were chatting, you said that when you landed in Iasi, these sort of tourist buses showed up and people got out of them. They were actually
That's
being
right.
used for a purpose.
So when we arrived there, we were sort of waiting for the buses to come get us, to take us to our destination. But we knew that on those buses, we were going to have the first group of refugees were going to be coming. So those refugees arrived and we dropped our suitcases and ran to those buses to start helping those people off the buses, helping them find their way through, made sure that handed out lollipops. I mean, whatever it is we could do, helped carry luggage if that's what if people gave us permission. You have to understand that people under these circumstances, the suitcase is basically their entire world. That's everything they brought from home. So one of the things we had to teach the medics was never to just grab somebody's suitcase, no matter how helpful you're trying to be, always ask permission, because they've had enough taken away from them. So we went, helped those people into the airport, went online with them so that they could get through the security there, and they went off to, got on the flight, and we got onto the buses and drove. It was about 3 hours or so to Kishinev.
Were you looked after? I mean, were you fed during the time from leaving Israel to that point?
Well, you know, I don't know whether it's Yehud Hatzalah or if it's Jews or if it's Israelis, but somehow it always involves food. So they were handing us sandwiches and stuff when we were on the Israel side. By the time we arrived in Moldova, it was like they wanted us to kind of get used to not having anything, I guess. So we didn't have anything to eat. By the time we got into Kishinev, we were pretty hungry. So we didn't know where we were, and we didn't know where we were going, but we did have an advantage over the refugees. We knew that we would be taken care of, and the refugees we met were only just discovering that there was somebody on the other end who was going to help them.
Yes, that came out very clearly from while we were chatting, that you get a little tiny feeling of what it's like to not know what's going to happen. You at least you know what is going to happen. You're going to be okay, and you had to convey this to the various refugees that you'll be meeting, that they are now basically okay. Was that more or less correct?
Yeah, that's we were taught 3 phrases in Russian. By the way, that's I was working on learning a little bit of Ukrainian, and now only discovered when I got there to Moldova that the language of conversation was almost always Russian, not Ukrainian. Although they speak Ukrainian to each other, there was a long-standing, in the Soviet Union, the teaching of Ukrainian was forbidden for a very long time. So a lot of people, their natural everyday speaking is in Russian. And you know, when you're under stress, you want to go right away to your mother tongue. So we were definitely, the Russian was more useful. When I learned a little bit of Russian. Very, very little. I actually know more Arabic than Russian, which is not a compliment.
Not particularly helpful. Yeah.
There were 3 phrases that we learned, and they were particularly as we were helping people off the buses. I want you to know that there were buses arriving 2 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, all day and all night, of refugees, 50 people on a bus. Many of them who hadn't eaten in 2 days. People who had taken a drive that would normally take them a couple of hours, but because of the emergency and all of the craziness, and then trying to avoid Russian troops and so on, it would take them 2 and 3 days to reach the border. So we learned to say, welcome, you are in a safe place, you are not alone. Those are the 3 messages that are most important for if you are dealing with any person who is dealing with trauma. They need to know that they are safe, and they need to know that you are there for them. And that welcome was awfully important too, because when they reach the border, there's nobody saying welcome. They're saying, we don't know if we're going to let you across, essentially. There were people standing online for 4 and 5 and 6 hours with their children, with their suitcases, with their pets. And when I say people, I mean women, small children, and older adults, because the men were all drafted to the military.
Okay, so Jill, you arrived on the very first, on day 1. So is that the beginning of day 1 now? Or was it the end of day 1?
Okay, so
we're into Kishinev, and you're finding out now where you're going to be staying and how you're going to get sorted so that you can then take off from there.
We're going to be taking down this map in just a second, and we'll move to some of the other photographs. But let me just Stay there. Don't go away yet. Can you go back to the other one? Because I think it's better for this purpose. Thank you. Okay, so I just want you to see these 4 circles because then you'll understand what we're talking about. So you saw Yassi and you see Kishinev. On the southern border, this is a border crossing, this right over the border from Ukraine. Yep. Called, yeah, well, we'll talk about it. I don't have my glasses on and I'm not going to be able to read it. Oh, yes, it was Palanka. Okay. Palanka is a southern border, border crossing. And then there was a northern border crossing, which you can see way up top. I personally wasn't there, but we had teams going up there. The trip to the one, the southern border was about, 2.5 hours. It was about 3.5, 4 hours to the northern border from Kishinev, where our headquarters were. Okay, so that gives you a basic idea. You can see where Moldova sits in terms of Europe. Got it. When I volunteered to go and was told I was going, I said, I better get on Google and find out where Moldova is. So you have an advantage over me here.
Okay, so again, I'm confused. Are we in the morning now or the evening on that sort of first day of the mission?
Okay, so what I'd like to do, let's go back to the photographs. You had my great grandma there. Let's go back to there. We won't need the map again unless somebody asks for it. Thank you, Steve. And now we can go to the next slide. Okay, so that's us setting out that evening. You can see how many people that is. That's how many people were in the Mishlachat, the delegation that went. Almost all of these people are medics or paramedics. And if you go to the next slide, whoop, go back, that's us. Whoop, go back one more. Oh, ahead one more, sorry. I'm talking too fast. Whoop. You do not want to show that picture, do you? Keep going. Yeah, got to go back. I'm not telling. Oh, they're getting to see all the pictures in the apps. Oh. That's it. Ta-da! Yay! Okay, so the young woman in the front row there is actually a medic. She happens to be the daughter of the woman in the middle. There were 4 of us who were who are senior members of the psychotrauma unit who went on this trip. And there we are, sweating for the last time in our orange coats. So we're about to leave, and it's about, I don't know, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, probably 3.
Oh, okay, so
go to the next photo.
Right.
Okay. Now we did the airports and all. So when we arrived, I don't have a photograph of the shul, but we're not. This photograph is right across from the shul. The shul was called Agudat Yisrael, and it's an Orthodox shul that it was our headquarters and was also the biggest operation for refugees in the area. But there were many others as well, and we worked with others as well. But this was across the street. Can you imagine? I mean, I don't know if you can get a sense of how cold it is out there. But those tents were places where people were staying because they had put them up in all kinds of spaces everywhere in the shul building. I'm going to take you on a little tour so you can see where everything is. But this was right outside. They had gotten, the people who did logistics for us got permission from the municipality to set up these tents. And they were well appreciated by the police who would come in and have their meals in one of our tents because it was warm in there. So this is across our across the street view. There was a whole bunch of them. I just showed you this particular.
Okay, so this is now for beginning. This is our first few hours of the morning.
This is one of the first things that we saw when we arrived in on site.
Okay, so you still don't know where you're staying yourself at this point.
Yeah, well, yes, I actually didn't find that out until quite a bit later that same day. Mm-hmm. So go on to the next photo. So one of the first things they did was feed us, and they did not feed us tapu chips. This is just a photo from the dining room. I have a tapu chip story, but it's not for this day. They had in the shul, they had set up a dining room, and they were preparing meals for all these people coming in, but they didn't have large enough facilities. So we had a kitchen set up outside, and eventually what we did was we took over a pub of a defunct Irish pub a few blocks from here, and they koshered it and they turned it into a facility for making the thousands of meals that we had to make to get hot food out to people, and we also had to feed ourselves. But the first day when we were hungry and tired, when we sat down at this table, and they gave us, like, I don't know, 10 noodles and a tiny little piece of meat and a cup of soup, we were so grateful to have that food. Because we were so tired and so hungry. And what I can tell you is it teaches you a lot about what the experiences are of these people coming in and having a hot meal for the first time in who knows how long. So we can go to the next photo. Okay, that's what the shul looked like. They took the Sifrei Torah out of that Aron Kodesh and moved them into a tent outside, and they turned every nook and cranny into sleeping places for people. The place was full of mattresses and people sleeping in them. And there were lots of moms and small kids, and we were, we would catch them wherever we could catch them and give them a toy to play with. We gave out a lot of blankets. We gave out a lot of tapu chips, and many children from the Ukraine discovered bamba while we were there. So this is kind of what we saw as soon as we kind of arrived. We started to see these folks and see what was going on in the building. And you can move on to the next photo. We had upstairs in the same building, they had set up a headquarters. I'm just amazed by the logistics, and I didn't do any of it, so I can really just give all the credit to the guys who came there before us. There was a clinic set up there. They were offering medical services to anybody who came in. I saw a lot of people coming in who needed to be seen because they had headaches and blood pressure issues and all kinds of stress reactions. Another thing that was really prominent was people who fled with medications, but they had run out by the time, and we were particularly insulin was the biggest deal.
Where did you get it from? Where did you get it from? Did you bring insulin with you?
We brought medications in, and we also went to the local pharmacies. The rules in the pharmacies in Moldova are much less strict than they are here or any place else, I believe. So there were a lot of, we were able to pick up certain, the kind of medications you would need a prescription for, we could get right from the pharmacies. But the medics had what to do. They were not bored. None of us were bored. And you can move to the next slide. This was the logistics center in the same area. The people were on the phone 24/7. There were a million things to do. We were getting calls from families abroad who were worried about relatives and people who'd gotten out and people who hadn't gotten out. And you had to have Russian speakers here to be able to do most of the work. We had all these flights that were being set up, and we had all of these materials that needed to be bought and brought here, brought there. Now I'm saying here. It was amazing what these guys had to do. And look, these are not like, look at the age of these folks. I mean, the burden that they were able to take on was just incredible.
Okay, well, perhaps you could go on to the next slide. I don't want to sort of jump too far.
Okay, we did a lot. I mean, one of the things we agreed to when we went was not to stand on ceremony. Whatever your title was, it didn't matter. Whatever your training was, it didn't matter. If something needed to be done, you needed to join in and do it. And we did a lot of lugging around stuff and unpacking stuff and repacking stuff. So it was you didn't have to go to they would just take these tons of stuff and dump it right in the middle of the courtyard of the shul. And then we would go out and organize ourselves and start distributing it however it needed to be distributed. So I got a lot of good muscle work in there.
But you weren't doing that much one-on-one therapy, were you?
No. No, it's a very different definition of, I say it's more therapeutic than therapy.
It wasn't snowing on the first day, was it?
Yeah, it snowed. I think it snowed some every day.
Okay. So the first day you told me you were setting up teams. What does that mean? What do teams mean?
Okay, so let's move on to the next one. I think you'll be able to, let me see if I can remember. Oh, so we were broken up into teams, and our teams had different assignments.
Right.
Okay, there was a team that went to the southern border. There was a team that, or two, there were one team or two that went to the northern border. People assigned to kitchens, people assigned to the clinics and whatever. So, but the first day we got there, a lot of what we had to do was just make sure that there was enough food to feed ourselves and to feed all of these other people. So there we are, all of us. Let's see, everybody. The person with the head covering is my colleague, who's a psychotrauma person. The woman with the standing next to me in the picture with the eggs is a medic, and these two down here are medics, and everybody's just cooking because that's what needed to be done.
Mhm. Okay, so on the first day, if we're going to divide this up into days, have we basically given everybody an idea of what the first day was like?
All right, let me see. Go one more. Go one more. Okay, so here you can see the tents again. We had, one of the tents was set up with clothing that had been sent, and we had a lot of kids and adults coming in there and getting coats and warmer clothing. That was the main thing people needed. You can go on to the next photo. We packed. We were not just feeding ourselves and the people who were in that show. The first day I was there, we did 800 meals. The second day we did 1,000 meals. The third day we did 2,000 hot meals. And I understand the number went up, but I stopped and counting after that, and you can see that there's a lot of work there, and you can see the Irish pub there. The downstairs was converted into this mass kitchen, and upstairs is where I think you have a picture there where we got to sit down and actually eat something once a day, sometimes twice a day. You can go to the next picture. Okay, so this is my roommate, Vicky. Now, Vicky, I wanted to show you a picture of Vicky because I met her about 10 minutes before this picture was taken. And after that, we were sent finally to get some sleep. We were sent to a hotel called Cosmos, which we have a lot of jokes to tell. The most important thing you need to know is we gave it a rating of about -5 stars. It's not on our recommendation list, but we were very happy to have some place to sleep. Our room must have been a deluxe because we had hot water, and I don't remember being cold, but it only had one bed. So after having met, and we had this a lot, after having met Vicky and getting to know her so very well for about 10 minutes, we had to sleep in the same bed. We became very good friends, as you might guess. And I had no idea which unit she was attached to until I was getting ready to leave. And I said, Vic, which unit are you in? And she said, Rehovot. And I said, no, I'm in Rehovot. Which unit are you in? And it turned out that not only does she serve here in Rehovot, she lives about 5 minutes walk from me. And I had never met her before.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
honestly, stories.
good night. Good night, Vic. Good night, Jill. You're very tired.
Okay, so we're going to carry on with photographs, or should we go back to the script?
Okay. Well, now we're talking about, we went to sleep. We got up the next morning. Every morning we got up, we got a briefing like soldiers. And you asked me about, we had to start packing the vans or packing the cars or whatever to take whatever we needed to the borders. My team was assigned, you'll see the picture of them in a second, to the southern border, my first day there, which is a Friday. So you can go to the next photo. And there we all are, piled in the car. That's how we got there. We had 2 medics, and we were lucky. One of our translators and medics were both translators and medics on this trip. I was the psychotrauma person, the guy in the front seat. I was going to say with the beard, but that doesn't help. With the hat is, he's a paramedic. He's from the Golan. The guy sitting next to him is a dentist, and he lives in Ramla and works in Ashkelon. And then there's another guy back there. He's a lawyer in Ashkelon, and she I don't even remember what she does, but she's in the Veilan. And everybody. We had never met each other before, but once I didn't have to be very long with these people before I became incredibly attached to them. So much so that once I got back, I couldn't rest until I knew that all of them had gotten back. I was
Actually,
watching.
on that point, you told me that one of the things that you felt when you got back, that this tremendous camaraderie and everybody having a job to do, and you were useful, and no minute was wasted.
Yeah, and you know, it's a real sense of mission. And it was just everybody who was there was like that. People worked very hard. I mean, you very rarely see this, and it's has a deep emotional effect that connects you to what the work that you're doing and the people that you're doing it with.
Right, right. So you finally got some sleep at the end of day one. You start on day two, and you're off to where?
And here we are in Palanca. You can see the name on the back there. That's what the border looks like on the opposite side. This basically, if you look at where that blue line is, and you can see people walking from there, on the other side of that is Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Where we're standing here, isn't it funny? They have a duty-free shop, but and a bathroom, but that's about it. This is the area that's sort of no man's land. It's neither this nor that. And then we're facing towards the border with Moldova. So they had to get through the Ukrainian border, which took a very long time and it was really scary for people, whether they were going to get through or not. And then we would help them get to the Moldovan border. They cross over, and then on the opposite side, there were more tents, and they could get some. Yeah, there were other organizations there, but interestingly enough, when it seems that all the different national delegations all went to Poland. We were the only one that came to Moldova at the time. Only Israel. Only Israel.
Wait, Jill, you mentioned about holdups, etc. I would have thought that the Ukrainian border guards would be letting everybody through practically without even checking. I mean, why do they care? And if it'd be any holdup, it would be on the Moldovan side. But it sounds like it was the opposite. Why is that?
Yeah, it was on the Ukrainian side. I don't know. That's a good question. But they were very, very careful. I know that they were stopping guys who were trying to get through for one reason or another. They were looking at people's passports carefully, because the question was what kind of nationals were they? And I guess the ones they were watching out for were Ukrainian nationals primarily, but there were people from all different countries. We saw somebody from the consulate, the Chinese consulate, waiting for people to join her on this side of the border. And I was told that on the opposite side, standing on line, were about 50 Chinese nationals waiting on that long line.
Oh. So what this is like when you arrive. This is your fresh face. What happened then?
That's right. And first thing we do is we walk around and try and check out the entire area and figure out what everybody's roles are going to be and what we can possibly do. So a good portion of the time I stayed in this area, and the medics primarily went across. The Ukrainian border guards allowed us to go into the Ukrainian side to be able to help people who were standing on line, because partly because some of them would faint standing there on the line. They would develop medical problems. You can imagine the stress was incredible. They were checking people's hearts, and sometimes people passed out. They had a call for ambulances over there. But a lot of it was just they had small children there. They would not allow them to go to the bathroom. I know that at some point they were allowing our people to walk children to the bathroom and bring them back to their parents, but they were not allowed to leave that line unless they wanted to go all the way back to the end of the line. So, and it was cold. It was very cold. So they were standing there under those circumstances. We wanted to bring them something. We brought them hot packs. We brought them blankets. We brought them food, whatever we could think of. To try and make it easier for them. So my colleagues spent a lot of time on the opposite side of the border. I was most of the time on this side, some of the time on that side, but most of the time on this side, receiving people as they came in, because a lot of the work I did was with families with children. You'll see, I think the next picture shows you some of the work I was doing. Oh no, that's another view of that same area. All those lines were on the opposite of that green light. Okay, and if you, there we go. Now there's me doing I carried my punching pads with me. And one of the things I would do, you don't need a language. I don't speak Russian either. Of the many languages I don't speak. The kids had no trouble understanding what this was about without any language at all. It really helps them get out a lot of aggressive feelings, a lot of frustration. They've been standing still for long periods of time and having to behave. And I say, don't behave, hit this. So, and it also warms them up. So I kept pretty busy with kids on this side of the border. I also had some toys that I could give them. I had lollipops. By the way, we'll talk about that in a little while. But lollipops is one very good thing to give to. If you think that somebody may be traumatized, they're in a traumatic situation. There are a few things that are particularly good to give them. We can tell you that bubbles, particularly children, but if adults are smart enough to use them, it's worth it for them too. Bubbles are really, really good because it gets you to blow out, and blowing out is what calms your nervous system down. It's not breathing in, it's breathing out that calms your nervous system. But if you don't breathe in, you can't breathe out. So, you kind of have to do both. So bubbles are really good. Another thing that works really well, lollipops are good because doing something as basic as sucking on something can be very soothing to people who are dealing with a lot of stress. And the other thing, and we didn't have nearly enough of them, were soft toys. Soft toys, little teddy bears, little dolls, something that you could hold on to that can hold on to you. So you can go to the next slide. And you'll see that little girl would not leave, but we had a great time. Okay, another thing that we did a lot of was helping, yeah, that's okay. She's adorable, but we don't have to see her again. You can go to the next one. There, stop there. Okay, so when they allowed us, you can see now this is the Moldovan side, and we were helping older people get across. You didn't have to be an elderly person to be exhausted and dizzy and not know what was what, and we were helping with that. We helped a lot of people with luggage. The people who were coming to Israel were limited in terms of how many suitcases they could bring. I mean, everybody was limited. How you could bring whatever you could drag with you, and depending on whether you had a car or not. That was a lot of work too. And you can see that as we're working on here, the sun is starting to set, and it's Friday.
Jill, before you go on to that, because that'll probably take us on to the next step of the chat, were people coming in cars? And were they allowing cars to drive through? If you had enough petrol and you stood in the queue on the other side and you were in your car, could you actually drive into Moldova?
There were some people who had cars. I didn't encounter them. I remember seeing cars, but these, I don't know quite what happened with that, but I know that a lot of people started out in cars, but also a lot of people started out in municipal buses. I heard that municipal buses in Ukraine stopped running at 10 o'clock at night. So they'd be on these buses, the bus driver would shut down the bus, and these people would sleep in a cold bus overnight until the bus started up again in the morning, and then they would continue their journey. It was very complex, very scary. There was one bus, one person who came in on a bus who told me that the bus that left after them had been there had been shooting. Russian soldiers were entering the area, so they stopped the bus and everyone on the bus got off and hid. Can you imagine what that must be like? From what I understand, they all managed to get back to the bus. They got on the bus and they did come, but if they came on a bus, then they had to stand on that line. And food, you don't get VIP treatment on a municipal bus, so. They were, yeah.
No, the whole, I mean, you're between the lines, what you're saying is it's absolutely horrific.
It's a horrific situation. I'm always amazed by how incredibly resilient people are. The fact that they aren't just crumbling into a pile and crying, and they actually manage to keep stepping forward, to me, I think is miraculous.
Right. So it's Friday night, the sun is setting.
The sun is setting. And I'm running around trying to gather people. You'll see the next few photos are on this subject. Okay, that person who looks grumpy is not at all grumpy. It was just a bad picture. She's the Israel consul in Moldova, and we were right there on the border with the Israel consul and people from the Joint Distribution Committee and us. I'm telling you, no other country, just us Israelis. And we decided we were going to have our candle lighting together. So I was running around to gather the people I was working with and her people. And as I was running around, I think that bus behind her, I saw a Chabad rabbi walking quickly toward a bus. It was far too late for him to be out getting a bus. But I addressed him in Hebrew. I said, "Is it candle lighting time?" And he stopped right where he was, and he thought for a second. And then he looked up at me and he said, "You may light candles, but you may not stop saving lives." And after that, we gathered together on the Moldovan side and got ready to light candles. So you'll see the pictures of us lighting on the Moldovan side with the border behind us. They took lots of pictures. I don't know why she brought a memorial candle, but I think it was pretty apropos nonetheless, having nothing to do with Shabbat, but with what all these people had been through. You see the woman in the wheelchair behind us, somebody carrying a dog. We'll see more dogs. People brought pets, and I think they were very wise to do that, as hard as it was. I think it gave people an enormous amount of comfort that they had grabbed pets to take with them. One man broke down and cried because he managed to bring his cat, but they didn't manage to bring the dog because they decided that the dog might survive, but the cat wouldn't. So I don't know. He's in Israel now. I guess we'll find out. You can move on to the next one. They're just such pretty pictures. Here you can actually see how far away the Ukrainian border is. Just look at the duty free. That's how you find out. And the sun is setting and it's Shabbat. And so what do? We say, we bless the candles and we go back to work. I took my backpack and wore it in a different way. That was my concession to Shabbat.
Rehovot.
You can go to the next photo. Well, the other thing that Hatzalah has is they have a group of rabbis who advise them all the time. When we finally got to go back, and it was dark, and I think we arrived at something like 10:30 at night, and I was hoping that there'd be something to eat, and I just wanted to go to sleep. And we got a message from the kitchen saying, "We're waiting for you. We have a Shabbat meal waiting for you. At the just get to us and we will feed you." And I don't think that this necessarily is that meal, but the tables were all set out. They had beautiful food out there for us. It was amazing. So we felt we were really well taken care of, but we weren't being taken care of by some committee somewhere. These were our people who were usually medics and paramedics, and in their regular lives, they work in offices or they deliver mail or they do whatever they do. But the kitchen staff worked 24 hours a day. They worked through Shabbat. The rabbi came there and said, "Don't you stop cooking. There are people who need this food."
How do you communicate?
The medics have special radios. I don't remember what they're called because I'm just a psychotrauma person. The reason the medics need those is they need to arrive here in Israel. They need to arrive on a call somewhere, but they can't. Their job is to get there within 3 minutes. So they have to. There's no time for anything. We have a longer span of time before we can get there. We don't have somebody dying of a heart attack while we're not there. So we use WhatsApp on our phones. And that's
you
how
also
we
mentioned
get.
one of the complications that people don't realize is if you have a SIM card that's good for Moldova, you cross over the border and
Cross over the border and you stand on the border and forget it. But I was fortunate. I had a global SIM card, so I was never out of touch. And I was instructed to keep my phone on and operational and follow it and use it during my service, whether it was Shabbat or not.
Okay, so day 3, you wake up on Shabbat and you're in Kishinev.
And that's, yeah, we're still eating dinner here. I was just so thrilled with dinner. What can I tell you?
Lovely.
Yeah. So we can go on. I just wanted you to see. Okay. Oh, and I gave you, this is to show you, this is the opposite border. I was not there, but on the opposite border, we set up a tent so that people could get things. You can see there are boxes of tea there and there's cakes there. One of the things that was really important to supply to people, and I don't see them there, but I'm sure they had them, diapers, wipes, women's sanitary products, women's hygiene products. You know, how many do you take with you before you run out and then you're stuck? And they don't have any source of income. So we were out there with and then again, assisting them in the snow. I like this little kid tasting the snow. I like to do that. Can you look at how this mom, the pleasure she's getting from watching her child do something that's just absolutely normal. But you can't take it for granted when people do something absolutely normal in such an incredibly stressful, abnormal situation.
Wow.
So we'll move on to the next one. Oops, I guess I gave you, got to hand out some Baba. Oh, you see the dog tucked into this woman's jacket? Can you see it way down in the corner on one side? She's wearing a red hat.
Right.
Lots of dogs. You see the baby being held up there? Lots of dogs, lots of cats, lots of babies. Yep, all tucked into coats.
Wow.
Just like you'd do. Okay, so let's go. Okay, so the next day, our assignment was to go to all the places where there were refugees staying in Kishinev. And we had to go to, well, there's our headquarters was already covered. So we were in, there were several hotels that had been basically shut down because of Corona, but had opened up because of the humanitarian efforts. And so there were refugees staying in some of the hotels. I don't know whether they got better than a -5 rating, but somebody told me today about a place that was better. So if anybody really wants to go to Moldova, I got a recommendation for you. So we would bring supplies to all of these places. Our medics and paramedics would provide medical services for people. Some people had gotten injured on the way there. I have so after we hit the hotels, also there were student dormitories where refugees were staying. I understand that there were students who moved, doubled up in rooms, I mean tripled and quadrupled up in rooms to make more rooms available so that refugees could stay there. That was one of the most significant interventions I had, was in one of those dormitories where on the 5th floor was a woman in horrible pain she apparently had had surgery on her hip in Israel, had come back to the Ukraine, and 4 days later, the war broke out. And then she had to run to a shelter because of the bombing, and she injured herself again, and she was in real trouble and very upset. And they called me on my phone to come because she was just not functional, and she needed some of the kind of work that I do. I didn't know quite.
Sorry, but you mentioned the 5th floor. Were there lifts working?
They didn't even bother to have lifts. What are you talking about? Oh, the ones in the hotel, now they were fun because they would break down periodically. So there you think you have a lift, but you don't necessarily have one. Anyway, in this place, she was there. I didn't know quite how we were going to do this, although I have a lot of experience working with people with no common spoken language. It's amazing what you can do with body language, and how comforting that can be for people, just if you listen to what they have to say, even if you can't make it out, and you just care, you know that this is a horrendous story because you can tell from looking at them. So I would call for a translator, and I would listen to that story as if I could understand every word, because it didn't matter whether I understood the words. I understood the music, as my father would have said. Alav Shalom.
Tell me, is there COVID there? Because nobody's wearing masks. It's like it's all finished there.
There's COVID there, but well, for photographs we often took them off anyway. But it was kind of a catch as catch can whether we were wearing masks or not. We got better about wearing masks by the 3rd day, when one of the refugees was diagnosed with COVID, and then everybody in our entire unit had to be tested. We did get better about wearing masks. This woman who had this terrible accident, it turned out, I asked her, do you speak Hebrew? And she didn't. Many of them spoke elementary Hebrew. Apparently the rabbis in their congregations in Ukraine had worried that they learn a little bit of Hebrew, and it was incredibly helpful. But she didn't speak Hebrew. So I said, do you speak any English? And it turned out that she was the head of a department in a university, a head of an English department in a university in Ukraine. So I was actually able to be unusually helpful in her case. Straightening things out, getting a paramedic to look at her and find out whether she would be healthy enough to be able to travel, and all the things that we needed to do. And a lot of what I was able to do was remind her of what a capable, well-educated person she is. That's who she is. She's just in a really horrible situation. It's temporary, and she had to remember who she was. And
Was there, I wrote down here, were there any frustrations? I can't remember what the story is that's connected with that.
Let me see where they come from. Aside from the frustration, I mean, I would love to have been able to speak the language, which I laugh at it, but and the accommodations that we had. But you know what? The accommodations we had are the kind of thing you complain about on a normal basis. But when you're seeing what these people are going through, you learn to be very circumspect about what you actually need. It's and if you're uncomfortable, just join the group. Everybody's uncomfortable. The other thing that I found that I think somebody could have found frustrating was the job on the third day there. When we get to the third day, we'll talk about that. But this was a lot of walking around, a lot of being driven around, going to see all of these people where they were staying, making sure that they were being taken care of. That was our main job on Shabbat.
Shabbat is your third day.
That was, yeah. And we can go to the next picture, even though I have to say, well, oh yes, that was a lot of what I spent about 2.5 hours blowing bubbles, 2.5, 3 hours blowing bubbles. I told you the bubbles were this young lady did not want to talk to me. She did not want to look at me. She did not want to have anything to do with me. The bubbles did the trick, and highly recommended. And we spent a lot of time with them. They also got kids to play with each other because they'd all start swapping at them, and then some of them would start blowing them. And so my lips looked like this by the end of the day from all that bubble blowing, but it was definitely worth it. We can go to the next picture. Now, this is actually in the airport on the way back, but I just want you to know that I still had my pads with me. And I was dealing, and if you talk about frustrations, you know what it's like to wait on a line in an airport? I bet you, well, if you're trying to travel now, you surely know what it's like to wait on a line in an airport. So I was going around and working with kids even in the airport. So I put this picture in here. You can go again. I'm sure I have more kids kicking things because it's fun. And look how happy they are. Actually, a young lady came up to me and said, "Are they Jewish?" And I said, "I don't know. Why would I care?" But she thought it was awfully important. You can go on to the next picture. That's right. And the next one. Okay. The third day, we were assigned, my Tsevet was assigned to stay in that area, right around where, at our headquarters in Kishinev. And we set up a clinic that was out in the tent area. Initially, we only had a clinic that was all the way up the stairs, no lift, in the building, in the shul building where we were, but it was determined that we needed to have one that was on ground level. So that's what these guys are doing, setting up the clinic. And in the next door tent, I set up a snack area and tried to set up hot water to have tea and coffee out there, because the only way to get those things was to go into the building, and the place was wall-to-wall people, because there were people coming and coming and coming, Jews, non-Jews, and whatever else there is, to stop, get a hot meal, start thinking about what they were going to do next, or meet up with family members who were coming to pick them up, or whatever it was that they were going to do. And a lot of the work we were doing with people who there was also the ones who decided they wanted to come to Israel, figuring out whether they were eligible to come in under the law of return or not. Were they coming in as refugees? How was it going to work? So we were helping them with all of that logistical stuff. Not me, because I don't speak Russian, but I could show them how to download the app, which spoke Russian just fine. So that worked out okay. So that was I wanted to once again give you an idea of the dogs we saw a lot of dogs who were pets of people who came, and I just, I admired them for caring about it. But you have to understand that if you brought a pet, you basically sacrificed a suitcase to bring a pet, because there weren't enough hands to do everything. And there were no young men to help you do that. So, but I think that they made some really good choices, some really hard choices. What do you bring with you? I think of my great grandmother. How did she decide what to bring with her and what not? You have your husband, you have your kids, and whatever else you can possibly bring in your hands. My Shabbat candlesticks are hers from Russia, and I don't know if she managed to bring anything else. So we can go to the next slide. This is the last day. These are photos from the last day. I didn't have a lot of time I didn't take very many photos, you might imagine, but I was stealing other people's photos. This was actually one of the most difficult moments. Our buses were there and our flight was getting, so when I say that we left, I don't mean that some cab took us to the airport. I mean, we got on these buses with 150 refugees coming to Israel. On these flights that Ihud Hatzalah had arranged. And who got on the buses? The people on the list. Okay, there were lists of who was supposed to be on the buses. And if your name wasn't on the list, you couldn't get on the bus. And we felt awful because all we could think of were lists, and who gets to go to the left and who gets to go to the right. And even though it meant that they had sufficient paperwork, they had done what they needed to do we knew that they could get into Israel.
Jill, when you mentioned something I forgot to mention before, when you're showing us about how much you're doing, and you mentioned that it's only Israel who are at the border. Back in Kishinev, so you've got all your tents set up and you're producing thousands of meals a day. Were there any other countries, nationalities that you saw doing something equivalent to what you were doing?
No, not in Moldova. Everybody, if you read the papers, well, now you can see more about Moldova. You see more about Moldova here in Israel than you'll see abroad. If you follow foreign news, everybody was in Poland. Now I believe the next people who came were actually the Leitzanim Refuim, the medical clowns, and we helped to bring them. And they came and they hung out with our guys. They needed the little red noses. That was very important to our work.
Who's paying for all these meals, for thousands of meals? I mean, it's like at some point you're going to run out of something.
We have this. We have, and we're still running this major campaign. And we had donors. I mean, donors stepped forward. Some of them were our donors of financial donors, and some of them are companies. Which reminds me of I did name myself the Tapu Chips Queen because I earned that title by spending 3 hours sorting Tapu Chips. When you take that much stuff, things are going to break. And we had bags and bags of Tapu Chips and bags of Bamba that burst in this process. I understand that some of it had to do with the flight. I don't know, but in any case, I took the Tapu Chips and I had to take the ones where the bags didn't burst and put them in one place and take the chips that had burst and pour them into another place and get rid of the bags. And the whole purpose of it was to clear space in a hallway because we had to have room for more clothing that was being donated, and we had to keep the aisle open so that people could make it upstairs to the logistics area and the clinics. So you had to have it in mind every minute that even stupid little things that you might be doing, all of them were important. And I think that was one of the most difficult things we've been hearing from people who came back from these delegations, to adjust to doing day-to-day things. And all of a sudden, everything you do doesn't seem to have so much significance. Whereas there, every little thing you did had significance. And that's a very big step down. And I tell people that the real trick is not to get used to the day-to-day, it's to realize that all those little things you do in your day-to-day life actually do have significance. It's just very hard for us to pay attention to those, to how significant they are. Whereas when you're in a new situation, it's very easy to notice all the little things.
Right.
In any case, we got all of these people onto buses, including us. The woman sitting behind, I was in charge of a bus. The woman sitting behind me had a broken leg. She had broken her leg in Moldova, and I was in charge, and I was in charge of taking care of her. She also was subject to panic attacks. So I made sure that I kept her amused because she spoke English. So that was another advantage. And made sure that when we stopped for bathrooms or whatever, that we found ways to accommodate her. And I was so thrilled. She was on my flight, and then I saw her in the airport when she got through the process, and I was so relieved, and so was she. And I don't know her name or where she was going.
So this is your fifth, this is Monday, this is your fifth day.
Yeah,
when
now we
you're
have to
going
move everybody
Yassi.
toward the airport.
Yassi Airport, right?
And back to Yassi Airport.
Right. I wrote here that saying were everyone allowed in? Did you mention that?
Everyone was allowed in because we made sure that they had whatever they needed to get in. The conditions under which they were allowed in varied. If they were Jewish, had a first degree relative who was Jewish, and had various degrees of relatives who were already living in Israel, they could get in under the law of return. And if they were not, and sometimes what that would mean, one spouse yes, one spouse no. So when the period that I was in with this was early on. So in order to, other refugees needed to pay some kind of a
deposit, yeah.
Picadon, yeah, thank you, deposit. You know, that's one of my, yes. When I came to Israel, I thought I was going to be bilingual, but now that I've been here 25 years, I know that I'm actually semi-lingual in 2 languages. Right. So this is us getting on the plane. It was about, I don't remember what time, very late at night. You can see there's on the left-hand side, you can see somebody has their dog packed in a dog thing. We're going to have an Israeli dog coming. And we were still responsible for these people while we were on the flights, checking on them, making sure everything was okay, if we were still awake, because a lot of us hadn't slept very much in the last period of time.
Right.
And when we arrived back in Israel, I understand that there were all kinds of dancing and singing. They were greeted by B'nai Akiva groups and all kinds of stuff. I didn't see that because when I got into the airport, it was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and all of the people that I was helping out, that were coming from our plane, except for our staff, were diverted off the line to this room in the side where there was water, and eventually they brought food, and they were going to have to check everybody's papers. And that was incredibly frustrating because we had not been warned about that. But the reason it happened is because at the same time that our flight was arriving, flights were arriving from all over the place bringing refugees, and the place was absolutely packed. And they actually were doing us a favor by not sending us downstairs to go through the regular process right away, because we would have been the place was wall to wall. So, but the problem was they didn't explain it to anybody. So it was oversight, let us say. But I stayed with them. I eventually ended up with this older couple who were adorable, unbelievable. I think they, the old joke about, they held hands the whole time, but of course you don't know whether they held hands because they loved each other or they want to make sure they didn't hit each other. But in any case, they spoke only Russian. They had no concept of the modern technology of using a phone to try to do translations, which I did do. I was able to do with some other people. And I had to get them through the testing, the COVID testing, which that was a very frustrating thing. We had not been told how that was going to work, whatever. it took a long time to get it done. But I didn't actually get in the cab to get home until about after 6 o'clock in the morning. And I had arrived at 1. So I was not happy letting them out that door. I had to be with them to make sure that they got out the door. After that, and it worked out. That was this couple where we didn't know who was going to come, and he cut his hand in the luggage rack and whatever, and there was no first aid. And then
Right.
in the end, there was somebody waiting there for them to take them to wherever. Thank God.
Right.
And I got to go home.
So when you hear about things like, millions of refugees, when you go down to the resolution of what you've been telling us this past hour, it's every single person has, apart from the story, the background, but they're 2 or 3, 4 days of suffering and all the little things, and you multiply it by millions, it's hard to absorb.
It's, I think it's really, in some ways, it was much easier for me than it may be for many of the people who are listening. Because
you didn't understand Russian, and so therefore you couldn't really get too emotionally involved. Was that the point?
Because I got to be there and do something. And when you're following these stories, your nervous system is getting stirred up constantly by the tragedy, by the pathos, by the injustice, by the violence. And there's nothing for you to do with that except hold it. When I was there, yes, I was hearing terrible stories, but I could do something. And that makes a very big difference. That in fact is the kind of work that I do as a social worker. I'm not, yes, I talk to people and I listen to people, and I think words are incredibly important, but it's very important to be able, that trauma, like stress, sit inside the body, and you need to work. And when you're able to work with your body to deal with it, it can really make a very big difference. I do a lot of work with trauma survivors here through martial arts and self-defense techniques to help them use the body to throw off some of what's gotten caught in there, and because of the circumstances they found themselves in. So I felt very, very lucky to be there. I was incredibly tired, but I did not want to leave. I came back when I came back because primarily because I had told my husband that's when I was going to be back. And I felt that if I ever wanted to have another opportunity to do a humanitarian mission, I needed to keep my word. And that was very important to me. So.
But Jill, you told me that you couldn't necessarily go back if you'd wanted to, because.
Well, I actually can't, because I was with the senior psychotrauma team. That was who I was bunking with, and I told them that I was willing to go back, but actually the head of the psychotrauma unit, the mission has changed since I was there. Now they're actually going into Ukraine, and she did not want. She said, "That's dangerous. I'm not sending you into the Ukraine." And this is the same woman who had sent photographs of her parachuting out of a plane. And I said, "Oh, you're going to tell me about dangerous. You've been parachuting out of a plane. Okay." But I would have had to beg to go back. and if I had gone back, I wanted to tell you guys, I want to give you the most up-to-date information. So I actually spoke to the spokesperson a few hours ago to ask him for the up-to-date information. It says, we've served more than 80,000 hot meals. We brought 2,500 refugees to Israel, and we've helped tens of thousands in Moldova. We're doing rescue operations inside Ukraine now, extracting people who need medical attention that they can't get in the Ukraine. We brought across more than 60 tons of medical supplies and humanitarian aid and food into Moldova and Slovakia. And from there, approximately 30 tons are now in our warehouse in Ukraine and being delivered by our ambulances to hospitals and medical clinics around the country. We purchased 5 ambulances to make the deliveries and extricate the people. So as of today, that's the report. And I know there have been at least 18 flights.
Amazing. Jill, thank you so very, very much. It'll take me. It's taken me a few days to get over the first time you told me. Now the second time, it's going to take me a few more days to get over it again, to absorb it all. Amazing what you did. Questions? Just unmute yourself and start. Okay, so the Rances.
Stephen, can you hear me? It's Daphne. You can't see me.
Oh, I can't see. Okay, go ahead, Daphne. Go on.
Okay.
I was going to say, put your hand up and then I'll notice. But go ahead, Daphne. I can see your hand. Not, but I can't not see your hand.
I wanted to ask Jill if she had contact with any of the other Jewish groups who were working in Moldova and in Ukraine.
The people we were in contact with, I think we got in there very fast. So we were there ahead of most of the groups and most of them were in Poland and not in Moldova. The people we were in contact with was the Israel Council, the Israel Consul, the JDC had representatives there. We occasionally crossed over with the Israel people. But I think they may have been mostly at the northern border. I didn't see
the World Jewish Refugee Rescue were in Moldova and rescuing people there. But you also said, and I understand that you were mostly concerned with Jewish people, but what about those who were not Jewish?
We dealt with anybody who we caught coming across the border. We would help them out, and we helped if they came to the headquarters in Kishinev. We gave them our medical services, food, clothing, toys, whatever, and helped them think through what their next plans were. So this was based in the Jewish community in Moldova. The special things that we were able to do that was very important was helping those who could go to other the ones who could come to Israel. There was that much more we could do for them, but we worked with anybody. We didn't ask people if they were Jewish, not Jewish.
Jill, but you mentioned to me that the by giving them a welcome and a safe place, they could then begin to figure out where they would like to go, because there are other countries they could go to, etc.
That's right, and we would our translators in the centers would be talking with them about that. They many refugees were going to Germany or to one of the other European countries. Some of them had relatives in these places. Some were going to wait it out in Moldova with the hopes of being able to get home. People who came to Israel, many of them, I mean, I really believe that a lot of them will go home to Ukraine when they can. The ones who made Aliyah, I don't know. But as we all know, we know that our countries of origin are still, for most of us, very important. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if they were for these people too.
Thank you.
Okay, Warren, go ahead.
A lot of what I'd actually wanted to ask Daphne, you already said, which was the fact that you were saying that you were working with everybody who was coming, but by the sounds of it, you were just more or less dealing with a lot of the Jewish people. So was that proportionally because you were working in the Jewish centres? I
think a lot in Kishinev, that was probably true. The Ukrainian church had a big tent set up also at the border, and they were putting out hot meals and stuff. The fire department, I remember that in Romania, the fire department and the police department had set up tents at rest stops to help to take care of people. They helped us too. I got to charge my phone. It was very important. For the most part, there was something more that we could offer. There was no country that was dying for refugees. There were many countries that were willing to take them. You know, we have a very special status in the world. We say, we're here for you. If you're Jewish, we will help you. And if you're a refugee, we can help you too, but we have a slightly different legal system for that. But the fact that we're able to throw open our arms to any kinds of refugees, in our case, in particular, Jewish refugees, but it became after a short time that we took quite a few thousand non-Jewish Ukrainian refugees as well, so without asking them for to put down a picadon deposit.
Mhm.
Thank you. Which we were very happy to hear, because it was very uncomfortable to be placed in that situation. But it was also important to give them a realistic picture of what their options were and have them choose what made the most sense for them. Part of what happens in a trauma is we lose our sense of control over our own lives. And part of the work of a person who works with people who are traumatized is to begin to give them back that control. You do that by giving people small choices to begin with, coffee or tea. Would you like to sit in this chair or that chair? And then eventually they're able to pull themselves together to the point where they can start thinking about, okay, what's the next step for me?
Any more? Joe, unmute.
Joe wants to know why I overslept this morning.
On my mind. No, what I was going to ask about was you brought enormous amounts of supplies. Was that funded mostly by the government or by donations or a mixture? Where did that come from?
I believe we eventually did get funding from the government to help with what we were doing, but a lot of the supplies came from individual donors, some of them very, very generous donors and who had to come forward really fast, and also from companies who donated goods. Right, we had all these food supplies. I hadn't had a Kit Kat in years because I generally avoid sugar, but there were, special circumstances. It was an emergency.
So I have a question as well. At the beginning, you showed us on the map the different places where people, where there was reception for people crossing over. But I mean, I assume that there were other places where people were trying to get across. Do you know kind of what happened to people? Were they able to get across in other places?
You know what, I don't know, and I don't know the lay of the land well enough to be able to tell you how possible that would be. But I mean, I was only hearing about refugees who were getting to the border crossings or not getting to the
about people who were coming to you, having crossed somewhere else and then walked to wherever you were.
When they would cross, that was the other thing, is when they saw us, this orange is kind of stands out in those orange jackets. Apparently, many of the Jewish refugees had been told to look for the people in the orange jackets. And many people came up to us and said, Shalom. Not all of them were Jewish. Some of them came and said, I hear you're the only country who came here to help us, which is true at that time. And in that place, we were the only country who was there. And we were very proud to have that flag and to be able to represent Israel. And we also had the consul right there, which meant that if somebody was interested in learning more about what it would take to be able to get to Israel, we could just walk them over to the consul and they could start the paperwork, which was very important. I mean, I don't think Germany was doing that, and that Germany has become a very generous society. So I was pretty proud I wasn't wearing the flag that much, but I was very proud to represent it.
But it's more organization, isn't it? The logistics, the organization, and making the decision and
Wow.
doing it quickly. I
am still in awe that I'm still in awe of what they were capable of doing. I know we had a flight come back today. I can't remember whether there's another flight going out, but we have continued to send delegations out there who are working, and there's some of our guys went there with the first one that haven't come back yet because they're still running things there.
Wow. Any other questions?
You should be very proud.
I think we all
the local kids done good.
Well, absolutely done good. Yep. Any more questions? Fine, then I'm going to thank you very much, Jill, and hand the broadcast back over to Ellie.
Dun,
Okay,
dun,
so
dun,
I have a couple
dun.
more questions. I just wanted to thank Jill on behalf of everybody. Thank Jill so very, very much for this presentation. It was really, really fascinating. We're all proud of you. You're a Rehovot lady. We're very proud of you. And I just wanted to point out that all the proceeds from this evening will be going directly to the United Hatzalah Ukraine Refugee Fund. Jill, please send us details how to do that. And if anybody wants to give extra now that they've enjoyed the evening, the kupa is still open.
I also want you to know that the Rehovot branch of Ichud Hatzalah is one of the strongest in the country, very well known for what we do. And remember that if you, whatever you might need, whatever, you know, if you should ever need medics or whatever, we're fighting in the Knesset to make a universal number, so you only have to, you dial the same number and you get whoever's closest, so that we're kind of wrestling with MADA on that, but eventually I think we'll work it out. And we're the only organization, one of the very few in the world that has a psychotrauma unit. So you can always wave and say hi to all of us people in orange.
I have to ask you, so if I want a first responder who's going to come quickly on his ambucycle, I don't dial the 10 whatever it is. I dial
1221. I think that's on me somewhere.
1221. 1221 or 1221. Yes,
1221. In hopes that that's going to change very soon, and it's going to be for the best interests of everybody. It'll also mean there'll be psychotrauma people available to help the MADA staffs, which they definitely need. There are a lot of differences between the organizations, but the one that stands out the most to me is that most MADA people, there are volunteers, but most MADA people are employees, and most Ichud Hatzalah people, all of the medics and the paramedics and whatever who aren't running divisions and stuff, we're all volunteers.
So are you suggesting actually that if we, God forbid, have an emergency, that we should perhaps dial 1221 first, or both?
I would dial 1221 first. If you need some, we do have an ambulance, but if you need something more, we'll make sure it gets done. But our people, the only people who are called in on these special microphone things are people who are like within 3 minutes of you.
I was going to say there, a few years ago, I saw an episode of Top Gear from BBC in England, where Jeremy Clarkson was saying, wouldn't it be wonderful we could get an ambulance within 3 minutes, and then started talking about United Hatzalah, get that anyway, and then they tried to do a skit on that basis to see if they could respond to things.
Well, the other thing we do is we have medics who have some training in trauma work, so that if they show up on the scene and there are enough medics to deal with the medical situation, rather than having 10 people standing around over one person who needs something where the family is coming apart all around them, they change hats, as they say. They change colors, actually. Do you see that? I don't know if you can see it there, but you see that I have a purple band on my vest? Okay, the purple band indicates that I'm in the psychotrauma unit. So they go back outside, they change to a different vest, they come back inside, and they say to the family, I'm here for you. I will stay with you until you toss me out or you don't need me anymore. I'm not going anywhere. What do you need? How can I help?
Wow,
I have an emergency, but
fantastic.
Yeah, I just would like to say also a special thank you to most people. We asked for, I don't know, 20 shekels from a member and 35 shekels from a non-member, and anybody wants to pay more. And I just wanted to say thank you, because almost everybody dipped into their pocket and gave a little bit more. So thank you very, very much indeed.
Thank you. People ask me who they should donate to. And I say, you could get out there and try to find out what the needs are right now, but there are people on the ground who are doing that work. And I think, there are other organizations as well. I really think the best thing to do is to trust the people who are on the ground to figure out what's needed. Because by the time we hear what's needed, that was a week ago.
Right, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
It's a very dynamic situation.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell this story. It's a really meaningful thing, and I know I'm I'm going to be unpacking it probably for the rest of my life.
I'm sure. I'm sure. I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. Take care. And Stephen and Steve, thank you very much for your professional assistance.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Stephen, I hope to see you soon. You've got to collect money from me.
Yes, I know. I walked past your house yesterday with my grandson and he had chocolate all over him. And I'm sorry, I just did not think of you.
You should have come in.
Yeah, I could have cleaned him
No,
up there.
no problem. We've
you could have
got
cleaned-
water.
Absolutely. I should have thought. Okay, next time.
Next time, yeah.
Good night, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, all.
Bye, Tom. Shabbat shalom.
Well, thank you very much indeed.
Great program.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, shabbat shalom.
How do I leave?